The shrill tone of my phone jolted me awake at 3 a.m. Fumbling to grab it, I saw Derek's name flashing on the screen. My heart sank as I hit speaker. "Olivia, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore." Derek's voice trembled through the tinny speaker. "I took the kids and left. We're going to stay with my mom for a while." The words hit me like a truck, stealing my breath. "What? Why? Derek, what's going on?" "I just can't keep living like this, with you always working and never being there for us. The kids need their mother." "That's not fair," I shot back, my voice cracking. "I'm doing this for our family. My mother was right about you. You've changed, Olivia. You're not the woman I married." His voice turned cold and resolute. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about custody arrangements." The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me alone with just the sickening sound of dial tone. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the phone, my entire world shattered into pieces. How could this be happening? Just yesterday, everything seemed fine, or at least I thought it was. Derek and I had our usual polite small talk over dinner while the kids played, but his distance lately should have been a red flag that something was very wrong. My head spun as I replayed our conversation, searching for any hint of what led to this. Of course, it always came back to his mother Janice and her constant needling that I was a bad wife and mother. I should have seen this coming from the moment that Harpy wedged her way into our lives. When Derek and I first met at that office party 10 years ago, we were a dream couple, successful professionals, madly in love, with the perfect future mapped out before us. Children, a beautiful home, maybe even start my own law practice someday. He seemed like such a caring, devoted partner, but Janice immediately took issue with me from day one, convinced I was just a gold digger after her precious son's money. No matter what I did, she constantly criticized and belittled me to Derek. Over time, he started taking her side more and more, almost like he was under her spell. Once the kids were born, she became even more insufferable, insisting on being a permanent presence to help with raising them her way. I felt like a stranger in my own home, with Janice controlling every aspect of the children's lives while treating me like the hired help. When I finally landed my dream job at Carlson & Associates last year, I thought it would be my chance to finally gain some independence and get out of her clutches. Boy, was I wrong. If anything, it only drove Janice further over the edge, accusing me of abandoning my family for my career. Derek just went along with it, as usual. But this was a new low, even for her. To just steal my children out from under me over some petty jealousy? That evil witch had finally gone too far. A cold fury began to build inside me, pushing the sorrow aside. Janice wanted to take everything from me? Fine. Two can play that game. She has no idea what she's unleashed by making this the battle she picked. If it's war they want, they'll get one, and I don't intend to take any prisoners. Not after how they've tormented me all these years. Derek and his mommy dearest are going to wish they never crossed me. I always played by the rules, did everything right, but not this time. All gloves are off now. They want to see what I'm truly capable of when I'm mad. They haven't seen anything yet. I tried calling Derek a dozen more times that night, but he never answered. Where could he have taken the kids? And what was this nonsense about staying with his mother? I had to get to the bottom of this. The next morning, I drove over to Janice's townhouse in the suburbs, praying they'd be there. Sure enough, Derek's car was parked out front. I took a deep breath and marched up to the door, my fist pounding furiously. It swung open to reveal Janice, her scowling face peering down that perpetual sneer. Well, if it isn't Miss Corporate Lawyer herself, finally deigning to visit. I pushed past her into the foyer. Cut the crap, Janice. Where are Derek and my kids? They're my grandchildren, too, you know, she snapped. And after the way you've neglected them lately for your precious career, we decided they'd be better off here with me for a while. You decided? How dare you? I roared, nostrils flaring. Derek had no right. There you go again, always making it about you. She clucked her tongue in feigned disappointment. When are you going to learn, Olivia? This family doesn't revolve around your selfish wants. I opened my mouth to protest, but Derek's voice cut me off from the hallway. Mom's right. This is for the best. He shuffled into view, his eyes swollen from crying and a haggard look on his face. I'm sorry, Liv, but I can't keep doing this. The kids need a real mother, not some workaholic putting her job first. Daddy? A tiny voice rang out, and Caleb peeked out from behind Derek, his little face scrunched in confusion. Why are you and Mommy yelling? My heart broke, seeing my sweet boys so scared and bewildered. I rushed over and scooped him into my arms, hugging him tightly. It's okay, baby, Mommy's here now. I want to go home, he whimpered into my shoulder. Sophia appeared next, her eyes welling up too. Don't fight, Mommy. Don't fight. Janice sneered at the scene. See, Olivia, this is exactly why they need to stay with me for now. You're too busy upsetting them with your selfishness. That's not true, I shouted, incensed she was spinning this as my fault. You two are the ones who just took off with my children in the middle of the night without any explanation. We had to get them away from your toxic influence, Derek said coldly. Ever since you started that big job, you've changed. You're never around anymore. I opened my mouth to protest, but he barreled on. Face it, Liv. My mom's right. Your priorities are all screwed up. The kids and we're an afterthought while you chase money and prestige. Well, I won't let you do that to them anymore. The words stung like venom, his face set in rigid determination. This wasn't just Janice's manipulation at work anymore. My own husband, the man I loved, had turned fully against me under her poisonous influence. You're making a terrible mistake, I choked out, tears streaming down my cheeks as I clutched the kids tighter. Don't do this, Derek. Don't let your mother rip our family apart like this. Sorry, but you left me no choice. His voice was eerily calm as he turned away. I'll get my lawyer to start the custody paperwork right away. I watched him head back down the hallway, my insides twisting into knots of panic and despair. This couldn't be happening. Not my perfect family, not my beautiful children. Janice sidled up next to me, that smug grin plastered on her face. You heard him, dear. The gravy train's over. Why don't you just make this easy on yourself and go on back to your fancy job? Her eyes glinted with cruel victory. We'll take it from here. I stormed out of that wretched house, my mind reeling and chest heaving with rage. How dare Derek and that witch Janice ambush me like this? To take my own children from me without any warning? It was unforgivable, but I knew pleading and reasoning with them would be useless. Janice had spent years poisoning Derek against me, chipping away at our marriage, and now she'd finally achieved her ultimate goal, isolating me from my family completely. Well, if that's how they wanted to play it, so be it. I'd been more than accommodating to her insufferable presence in our lives for too long. No more Miss Nice Olivia. The gloves were officially off. I'd hire the most vicious bulldog divorce lawyer money could buy. If Derek wanted to go nuclear over custody, I'd bury him and his mommy dearest under an endless tsunami of legal paperwork and courtroom blood sport until they choked on it. Those two had awoken a vengeful fury in me that they'd soon regret. I'd show them just how merciless I could be when properly motivated. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. I swung it open to find Janice standing there, holding Sophia's little hand. She shoved the sobbing child at me without a word and turned to leave. Janice, wait! I called after her, pulling my daughter close. What's going on? Where are you taking her? She whirled around, her face scrunched into its perpetual sneer. Nowhere. We've decided to let you have your precious daughter back for now. For now, I sputtered, panic rising in my throat. What about Caleb? I need both my children. Don't be so greedy, Olivia. She chided in that infuriatingly condescending tone. You should just be thankful we're allowing you this much time with Sophia. We know how busy your big career keeps you. You can't do this, I shouted, my blood boiling. They're my kids, not yours. I'll see you in court for this, you miserable hag. Janice's eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly regained her composure. Such language in front of the child. Tsk-tsk. Is this the environment you want her in? She turned on her heel and strode back to her car, calling over her shoulder. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be, dear. We're doing what's best for the children, whether you like it or not. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, holding Sophia and fighting back hot tears of rage. How dare they split up my children like parcels? This was a new twisted low, even for Janice. Sophia looked up at me, her big eyes brimming with tears. Where's Caleb, Mommy? I want my brother. Shh, it's okay, baby, I whispered, stroking her hair as my own tears spilled over. Mommy's gonna fix this, I promise. We'll get Caleb back soon. But even as I said it, a knot of dread twisted in my gut. Janice was up to something far more sinister than I realized. She was going to do everything she could to take my children from me for good. Well, two could play at that game. If she thought she could torture me by separating my kids, she was sadly mistaken. This just hardened my resolve further. I'd stayed too long in my passive, polite lane, tiptoeing around her narcissistic madness to keep the peace. But no more. If Janice wanted an all-out war over my family, she just got one. From that moment on, I devoured every legal book and website I could find, arming myself for the custody battle ahead. I'd hit her with an overwhelming barrage of paperwork, courtroom procedure, and obscure legal loopholes until her devious little head spun. No more being the sad, mousy wife letting her monstrous mother-in-law walk all over me. That complacent doormat was dead and buried, replaced by a merciless litigator with infinite patience and the drive to grind Janice's schemes into dust. She started this fight by taking my son, but I would end it by taking away everything she held dear: her money, her pride, her control over my family. By the time I was through with the two of them, Derek and Janice would be left as empty, broken husks. I could only hope they were prepared for the relentless hell I was about to unleash. Because I wouldn't stop, I wouldn't rest, until I'd extracted my total revenge. The next few months were a blur of legal strategizing and courtroom battles. I poured every waking hour into devouring case law, filing motions, and prepping for the inevitable custody hearing against Derek and Janice. My work at the law firm inevitably suffered, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Winning back my children was my sole priority now. If the partners had an issue with that, they could find someone else to bill mindless hours for their corporate clients. One evening, I was burning the midnight oil at my desk when my secretary buzzed that Derek was on line 1. Steeling myself, I picked up the phone. "What do you want?" I said flatly. Small talk between us was pointless at this stage. "Nice to hear your warm greeting as always, dear," Derek replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Though I can't say I'm surprised by your hostility lately." "Oh, like you're one to talk about hostility," I shot back. "You're the one who took our kids and shut me out for no good reason." "There you go again, making this all about you," he tutted in that infuriatingly condescending tone I'd come to loathe. "Have you ever stopped to think how your obsession with work makes Caleb and Sophia feel?" White-hot anger boiled up inside me. "Don't you dare try and guilt-trip me over being a working mom. I'm doing this to support our family, in case you've forgotten." "Sure, keep telling yourself that," he scoffed. "We both know your big-shot lawyer job is really just about massaging your own ego at this point." I opened my mouth to protest, but he plowed on ruthlessly. "Face it, Olivia, you're chasing money and prestige while leaving us to pick up the pieces. Your priorities are all screwed up." "That's rich coming from you," I shouted, my voice cracking with rage, "considering you stole my children away to live with your wretched mother." An icy chuckle came through the line. "Don't act so innocent. We both know this was a long time coming after the way you've neglected us." "You arrogant, self-righteous prick." The insults spilled out before I could stop them. "How dare you try to play the victim card after everything you two have put me through?" "Watch your mouth," Derek growled, the humor vanishing from his voice. "Or you're only going to make this custody fight harder on yourself." My blood turned to ice at his brazen threat. This whole time, I'd been gearing up for the courtroom battle of my life against Janice. But Derek was just as unhinged and vengeful as his mother. They truly were a united front, hell-bent on destroying me over some deranged notion of family loyalty. "Well, if that's how they wanted to play it, you two can try whatever slimy tricks you want," I said, my voice eerily calm. "But I won't stop until I get my children back. All of them." "We'll see about that," Derek replied with a snort. "Good luck affording that big-shot lawyer you're inevitably going to need after we take you for everything you've got." The line went dead, leaving me seething and chilled to the bone. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. Derek was fully drinking his mother's poisoned Kool-Aid now. Any shed of the caring, loving husband I once knew was gone, replaced by a vindictive, spiteful stranger, just like Janice had always wanted. Well, if they thought a few hollow threats were going to deter me, they had another thing coming. This just cemented my resolve to fight tooth and nail no matter what lows they stooped to. I'd bury them under an endless avalanche of litigation and courtroom procedures until they choked, hit them from every angle with the most aggressive, unrelenting legal barrage imaginable. They wanted to play hardball and drag this out? Fine by me. Because in the end, it would leave them bankrupt and destitute, the ultimate revenge for their cruelty. The coming months would be an all-out scorched earth war between us, and I had no intentions of playing by any rules or taking prisoners. Not after how they'd already torn my family apart so callously. By the time the final custody ruling came down, Derek and Janice would be left as empty, broken husks, finally suffering the consequences of their selfish arrogance. They were about to learn the hard way that they'd awoken a merciless, unstoppable force in me. I would grind them into the dirt until they begged for mercy. The custody hearing arrived sooner than expected. I marched into the courthouse that morning, my game face on and ready for battle. Derek and Janice thought they could bully me with hollow threats. They were about to learn just how outmatched they were. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, back ramrod straight, while my high-priced legal team made some last-minute preparations. Derek and that wretched mother of his sauntered in a few minutes later, wearing identically smug expressions, like they'd already won. As the proceedings got underway, I quickly realized this was going to be even nastier than I'd braced for. Derek's lawyer, a greasy, ferret-faced man, came out swinging with all manner of allegations about my unfit parenting and supposed neglect of the children due to my career obsession. I shot a murderous glance across the aisle, but Derek just smirked in return, content to let his lackey do the character assassination. For her part, Janice watched the proceedings like a queen holding court, secure in the belief her devious schemes would prevail. But I was ready. My own team systematically dismantled every bogus claim, presenting evidence, witnesses, and case histories that proved what a sham this whole thing was. An attempt by a controlling, narcissistic mother to turn her own son against his wife out of petty jealousy. The fireworks really began when I took the stand, and Derek's lawyer began grilling me about my supposed dereliction of family duties. I couldn't resist throwing some rhetorical punches of my own. "You claim my career has made me an unfit parent," I said, turning to face Derek directly. "Yet you're the one who took our children and left in the middle of the night like a common thief." His cocky expression faltered for just a moment before the sneer returned. "Don't play the victim, Olivia. We both know this was a long time coming after how you neglected us." "Neglected you?" I scoffed, unable to contain my disgust any longer. "While you let your mother isolate me and treat me like a servant in my own home?" Janice started rising from her seat in protest, but the judge rapped his gavel warningly. "One more outburst like that, and I'll have you removed from this court, Miss Sheehan." She glowered, but fell silent as I turned back to Derek. "How dare you try and take the high road after everything your deranged mother has put me through these past several years?" "That's enough," Derek's lawyer interjected, but I was on a roll now. "This has never been about what's best for Caleb and Sophia," I said, shooting a withering glare at Janice. "It's about feeding your massive ego and controlling everyone around you like you've always done." "Objection, Your Honor!" The Weasley lawyer shouted. "This is unsubstantiated character assassination." "Sustained," the judge said heavily. "Miss Thompson, I'd advise you to rein in your outbursts moving forward." I took a breath, realizing I'd let Derek and Janice get under my skin. Losing my cool like that could seriously undermine my case. I had to stay focused and relentless. The rest of the proceedings were a blur of more witness testimony, evidentiary motions, and endless grandstanding by both legal teams. When the final gavel rang out, I could feel the strain and tension radiating from every muscle. As the courtroom cleared out, Derek and Janice made sure to walk past me, twin sneers of contempt etched on their smug faces. "Quite a performance," Derek said mockingly, "but I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you." Janice leaned in close, her hot breath on my cheek. "He's right, you know. You're only delaying the inevitable at this point." My fists clenched at my sides as she pulled back, that familiar sickly sweet smile plastered across her thin lips. "After all," she purred, What judge in their right mind would award full custody to such an emotionally unstable, career-obsessed shrew of a mother? I watched them saunter away, that cold knot of dread and fury coiling inside me once more. She was trying to get inside my head, to rattle my confidence. But Janice didn't realize she was only fanning the flames of my determination. If she thought I'd back down after just one round, she had vastly underestimated how far I was willing to go. This was merely the opening salvo in a protracted war I fully intended to win, no matter what emotional or financial costs I had to endure. They wanted to fight dirty and drag this out? So be it. By the time I was through with them, Derek and Janice would be left as empty, broken husks, having long paid the ultimate price for their arrogance and cruelty. I would grind them into the dirt until they had nothing left but the cold, brutal reality of just how disastrously they'd underestimated me. The custody ruling came down a few weeks later, and it was even worse than I feared. The judge, clearly under Janice's narcissistic spell, awarded her and Derek full custody pending further review. I was only granted limited visitation rights, a few measly hours per week with my own children, as if I were some casual acquaintance and not their mother. The audacity of it made my blood boil. Of course, Janice couldn't resist another round of smug gloating, showing up unannounced on my doorstep the next day. Well, if it isn't the disgraced Miss Corporate Lawyer herself, she sneered as I opened the door, not even trying to mask her contempt. I trust you've had some time to, reevaluate your priorities? What do you want, Janice? I growled, in no mood for her petty mind games. Just coming to set some ground rules for your upcoming visits, she replied with a sickly sweet smile. Assuming you even want to exercise that privilege, given your emotional instability of late. My fists clenched at the backhanded insult, but I bit my tongue. Losing my temper now would only give her more ammunition. Of course I want to see my children, I said through gritted teeth. Name your terms. Glad you can be reasonable for once. She casually brushed past me into the living room, looking around with obvious disdain, although I do question what kind of environment this is for them. I watched her trail a fingertip along a shelf, her nose crinkling in disgust at the thin layer of dust. You really must get a maid or something, Olivia. This place is a sty. If you just came here to insult me, then get out, I snapped, my patience already wearing thin. Temper, she chided, turning to face me with a smug grin. Is that any way to speak to the person who literally holds your access to your own children in their hands? The cruel jab hit its mark, and I felt the wind go out of me. As much as it killed me to admit, Janice had all the leverage now thanks to the custody ruling. She could make my life a living hell on a whim. Listen closely, dear, she continued in a soft, almost bemused tone. This is how things are going to work from now on. You'll get your 4 hours of supervised visits on Saturdays, and that's it. No extra calls, no extra time, or else the deal is off. I opened my mouth to protest, but she barreled on. You so much as raise your voice to me or Derek, and I'll have those visitation rights revoked. You'll never see Caleb and Sophia again. She let that dark threat linger for a moment before her sickly smile returned. We clear? My jaw clenched, but I gave a slight nod. I was trapped, and she knew it. Janice's grin widened as she took a step closer, that hot, rancid breath fanning across my face. I'm going to enjoy watching you stew in your little failure puddle, Olivia, seeing the smug, arrogant bitch I've had to put up with these years get her long-overdue comeuppance. Summoning every ounce of restraint, I remained stone-faced, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside I seethed with roiling fury and indignation. How dare this hateful, miserable crone gloat and revel in my suffering like this? Don't worry, I'll be sure to give Caleb and Sophia your love, Janice purred, that serpentine smile never wavering. Although at this rate, I may as well just have them call me Mom, too. It's not like you'll be a presence in their lives anymore. The casual, callous dismissal of my role as their mother was the final indignity. Before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, cracking against her smug face with a satisfying thwack. Janice recoiled, clutching her reddening cheek as she gaped at me in stunned outrage. You struck me, you deranged, pathetic little... But I cut her off, the dam finally bursting after months of holding back my fury. Get out of my house this instant, you miserable, soul-sucking succubus! I grabbed her by the wrist, ignoring her cries of protest as I dragged her towards the door. You want to play sick mind games and threaten me? Fine. But you just signed your own death warrant, you vindictive old hag. With a final shove, I flung her out onto the front step, her bony body crashing to the concrete. Janice scrambled to her feet, eyes bulging with rage and disbelief as she clutched her injured wrist. You're going to regret this, you psychotic bitch! She screamed, spittle flying from her gnashed teeth. I'll see you ruined for this, you mark my words. You'll never see your children again as long as I'm breathing. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off towards her car, still clutching her wrist and muttering endless profanities under her breath. I could only watch, chest heaving, as she peeled out of the driveway. As the cloud of dust settled, the gravity of what I'd just done slowly washed over me. I'd struck Janice, the woman who now controlled all access to my own flesh and blood. In her twisted, vengeful mind, that was an unforgivable sin. My hands began to tremble as I realized the full consequences. She would make good on her threat. I would never see Caleb and Sophia again. Not unless... A cold, dead calm settled over me as I turned back towards the house, my path now clear. There was only one way to rectify this, only one path to get my children back. If Janice wanted to go scorched earth and drag this conflict out to its bitterest end, then so be it. I was done holding back. Done being the sad, mousy victim. That deranged witch had awoken something primal and merciless inside me, something unbound by laws or ethics, driven solely by the instinct to eliminate any threat to my family by whatever means necessary. Derek and Janice wanted total war? They just got it, whether they realized it or not. I would grind them down through sheer, relentless attrition and tactical savagery until they had nothing left. Not their pride, not their assets, nothing. By the time I was through with them, they would be left as empty, broken husks, finally suffering the consequences of their arrogance. No more being the sad, complacent doormat. That person was dead and buried, replaced by a mercenary litigator, fueled by cold, calculating rage. If they thought they could torment and threaten me into submission, they had vastly underestimated what I was capable of when pushed too far. They wanted to see what I was truly capable of when I was mad. They were about to find out. The next few weeks were a blur of nonstop litigation and courtroom procedures. True to her vindictive word, Janice filed an emergency order to revoke my visitation rights after our altercation. I countered by burying her and Derek in a tidal wave of motions, injunctions, and petitions challenging the biased custody ruling. No more being meek and compliant. I would dismantle their lives through sheer, overwhelming legal force until they begged for mercy. The gloves were officially off now. Derek's sniveling lawyer was the first casualty, resigning in exasperation after my team inundated him with endless paperwork and discovery requests. I took petty satisfaction in imagining his frustration trying to earn his fees from those two misers. Next, I launched a fusillade of financial strikes designed to cut off Derek and Janice's resources. Audits, asset freezes, you name it, all perfectly legal maneuvers, just highly aggressive and relentless in their execution. The first major blow landed when I uncovered proof that Janice had been illegally sheltering assets to avoid taxes. Presenting my evidence in court, the judge had no choice but to appoint an emergency receiver to seize control of her entire portfolio until the matter could be sorted. The look of impotent outrage on the old bat's face as the federal marshals boxed up her records was almost orgasmic. For once, she was the one being stripped of her power and control. "You'll pay for this, you vindictive little insect," she raged at me, tiny flecks of spittle spraying from her gnashed teeth. "You hear me? I'll see you destitute and crawling in the gutter before I'm through." "Save it for someone who still cares, Janice," I replied with an icy smile. "You're the one who turned this into a war. I'm just fighting back with equal vigor." Her eyes narrowed to slits, but she had no snappy rejoinder. We both knew I'd landed a decisive early blow, and there was nothing she could do about it for now. With Janice's assets frozen, I turned my sights on bleeding Derek's finances dry. A few adept subpoenas uncovered a litany of shady business dealings, unpaid loans, and tax avoidance schemes he'd tried sweeping under the rug over the years. Before he could react, I sicked the IRS and a battalion of collection agencies on him, garnishing his wages and assets down to the last penny. The disbelieving look on his face when the court notices started piling up was utterly priceless. "This is low, Olivia, even for you." He snarled when we came face to face outside another hearing. "Dragging our personal lives into this just to feed your ego." I just smiled thinly and shook my head. "Don't give yourself so much credit, dear husband. This has nothing to do with ego. It's about teaching you two deranged narcissists a long overdue lesson in consequences." "You mean ruining us over some petty revenge scheme?" he sneered, trying to regain some bravado. "Real classy, counselor. I can see why the kids are better off with us." My polite mask slipped for just a moment, the rage bubbling up again. "Don't you dare talk about my children, you arrogant prick. Not after how you stole them from me in the dead of night like a common thief." Derek's face went pale, and he took an involuntary step backward. For all his feigned bravado, some part of him knew I wasn't the same mousy doormat he could easily dismiss anymore. "You want to play hardball and drag this out?" I said, my voice low and eerily calm. "Be my guest. But just know that I'm not going to stop until I've taken everything from you. Your money, your assets, your inflated ego, all of it is going to burn." He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. "You and your deranged mother awoke something in me, something without limits or restraint. I am rage and vengeance incarnate now, and I won't stop until you're left as empty, broken husks suffering the full consequences." For a long moment, Derek just stared at me, eyes wide and uncomprehending. Then, without a word, he spun on his heel and scurried away like a whipped dog. I watched him go, that surge of dark satisfaction rising inside me once more. Let the bastard run and cower for now. It wouldn't do him any good in the end. My merciless legal barrage was only going to intensify from here. I would bombard them from every angle, probing for any weakness or violation to exploit until they had nowhere left to turn. Derek and Janice thought they could torment me, could take my children and leave me a broken, blubbering mess? They were about to learn just how disastrously they'd underestimated my resolve. I would counter every move, dismantle every scheme, until their entitled, arrogant lives lay in smoldering ruins around them. Only then, with nothing left but the cold reality of their disgrace, would I allow them a shred of mercy. The coming months would be a brutal, soul-crushing guerrilla war of legal attrition. But I had no intentions of taking prisoners or showing any quarter. Not after the way these two depraved narcissists had already torn my family apart. When the final, decisive blows finally landed, Derek and Janice wouldn't just be defeated. They would be utterly destroyed, left as empty, broken husks suffering the ultimate consequences of their hubris. If they thought I would show them any mercy after everything they'd done, they were about to be very, very disappointed. The final custody hearing arrived, and I marched into the courthouse that morning like a conquering general. After months of relentless legal bombardment, Derek and Janice were already decimated shells of their former arrogant selves. I couldn't resist a thin smile as they slumped into their seats across the aisle, haggard and hollow-eyed. Derek's expensive suit hung loosely, his gaunt face and overgrown stubble telling of personal grooming now an afterthought. Janice looked even worse, her expensive makeup unable to mask the sunken cheeks and dull stare of someone utterly defeated. As the proceedings began, my barracuda of a lawyer wasted no time eviscerating what little remaining credibility they had left. Exhibit after exhibit detailed their myriad financial improprieties, ethical violations, and general instability, a literal mountain of evidence showing what unfit parents and guardians they truly were. I sat back, reveling in every agonizing moment as the judge's brow furrowed deeper with each new damning revelation. The looks of impotent rage and panic flashing across Derek and Janice's faces were utterly delicious. When it finally came time for them to take the stand, I could barely stifle my glee as Janice immediately went on the offensive under cross-examination. "This is all a perverted revenge scheme by that woman," she shrieked, tiny flecks of spittle spraying as her bony finger jabbed towards me. "She's completely deranged, willing to lie and destroy everything in her path just to feed her ego." "Miss Sheehan, I will have order in this court," the judge intoned, shooting her a withering look. "One more outburst like that, and I'll have you removed and held in contempt." Janice slumped back in her seat, fuming impotently but clearly cowed by the threat. I couldn't resist catching her eye with a thin, victorious smile. For once, she was the one being stripped of control. Derek was even more useless on the stand, alternating between stammering non-answers and feebly trying to discredit the financial evidence against him. My lawyer just sat back and let him ramble, secure that his own words were digging his grave deeper. "That's enough, Mr. Thompson." The judge finally cut him off with an annoyed sigh. "I've heard more than enough today to render my decision." An expectant hush fell over the court as he began rifling through his notes. I could sense Derek and Janice's terror, knowing their fates now rested entirely on the words of a man utterly repulsed by their actions. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented over these proceedings, the judge began in a solemn tone, "I am ruling that full physical and legal custody of the minor children Caleb and Sophia Thompson be awarded to their mother, Olivia Thompson, effective immediately." The courtroom practically shook from the shockwave of Janice's outraged wail. "No, you bastard! You can't do this!" "Silence!" the judge thundered, slamming his gavel with authority, "or I'll have you both remanded into federal custody for contempt." Derek and Janice immediately shrank back, cowed into terrified submission like the pathetic shells of human beings they'd become. "Furthermore," the judge continued, turning his icy glare on them, "in light of the multitude of financial crimes, ethical breaches, and general misconduct uncovered during these proceedings, I am ordering the permanent termination of custodial rights for both of you." He paused to let those words sink in, and I could practically hear Derek and Janice's hearts shattering in unison. The sweet, intoxicating taste of victory was finally mine. "Congratulations, Miss Thompson," the judge said, turning to me with an approving nod. "Your tenacity and perseverance in pursuing justice for your family have been remarkable. I wish you and your children all the best moving forward." With that, he rapped his gavel one final time, signaling the end of my long, brutal campaign. As the courtroom began clearing out, I turned to face the two empty, broken people who had put me through this hell. Derek and Janice just sat motionless, their eyes glassy and unseeing, the weight of their disgrace finally settling in. I couldn't resist one final parting shot. "Well, well, if it isn't the disgraced Mr. and Miss Thompson," I said with a thin, victorious smile. "Quite a performance you two arrogant fools put on these past months, but I trust you've had time to properly reevaluate your priorities?" Derek looked up at me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, but Janice just glared balefully, unable to muster even a snide rejoinder. The fire in her had finally gone out, extinguished by the cold reality of her total defeat. "I do hope you'll take this lesson to heart," I continued, unable to resist twisting the knife, "about the consequences of letting your selfish egos and insatiable need for control consume you." Leaning in close, I made sure they could both feel the heat of my breath on their faces. "You awoke something in me, something without limits, morals, or restraint. I became a force of pure, unstoppable vengeance, and I ground you both into dust because of it. So congratulations, you arrogant, depraved fools," I hissed, my voice dripping with contempt. "You finally got to see what I was truly capable of when pushed too far. I hope, for your sakes, that it was worth it." With that, I turned and strode out of the courtroom, not daring to look back. There was nothing more to say. I had won, completely and utterly. Derek and Janice were left as empty, disgraced husks, having learned the hardest lesson about the brutal consequences of underestimating me. As for me, I had reclaimed my life, my freedom, and, most importantly, my beautiful children. The years of torment were finally over, the demons of my past exorcised. I was battered, but victorious. The nightmare was finally over, and a new chapter was just beginning.